How did you get in?
Ooh, great question. By accident, like probably everything good that's happened in my life. I wish I could say there was a master plan, but there was no master plan. So I started writing on the internet about some of the stuff I was doing with this little local fight club I'd created, and got invited over to another garage group in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, with a guy who's dead now by the name of Paul Gomez, who was a national level adjunct instructor with Andy Stanford, with his company at the time, Options for Personal Security. So Paul invited me over. I worked with this garage group, and he's like, wow, nobody's doing what you're doing, the way you're doing it with the equipment that you're using, and it's kind of special. You should think about hanging a shingle out. And I was like, because I had been a police academy instructor since 1992. And this is around 2001 when Paul and I first met. Anyway, he stayed on me about hanging a shingle out, and I was not really interested in doing that. We were really getting beat up with methamphetamine and labs at the time. And that was taking a lot of my time. But I was getting married for the first time, and then I was complaining to Paul about not getting enough overtime for the very extravagant wedding that my first wife wanted. And Paul seized the moment, and he said, hey man, I've been trying to get you to do this for a while. Why don't you let me set up some of these classes, and I'll do everything. I'll get the venue, and you just show up and do your thing. Okay, hard to resist. So I did the first one. Made more money than I'd ever made in my life for a single day's work. But that wasn't really the thing so much as I drove those people, and it was July in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and I drove them for 11 hours.
That's great.
Of just rough, brutal training. And man, they were all grinning and happy, and I'd never experienced that kind of engagement in the professional community, and it really lit a fire under me. And so I did another one, and I did another one. Paul set the first year, Paul set up those up because I didn't know how open enrollment worked, but the people and their engagement and their curiosity, quite frankly, took my instructorship to an entirely different level. So I just kept doing it, and then 8 years in, I'm like, I can actually make a living doing this, and I had enough time to retire. Things were fairly toxic in my sheriff's department at the time, as things invariably get, when you've got 20 years on. So I decided to pull the plug, and it was the smartest thing I ever did. So 19 years now in the business, 10 of those full time, and man, it's pretty awesome. So to answer your question, it's a long-winded way of saying why, it completely happened by accident. I wish I could say there was a master marketing plan, or, I absolutely controlled my destiny, but that's not it, dude. There was luck, there was passion, there was the right combination of elements. There was also the fact that, there are other people that do what I do, but I think I was pretty much the guy that first got on the road traveling with 6 Glock simunition pistols and a ton of simunitions I'd gotten from the Navy, of all people, and all this weird mishmash of protective gear, and used all of that equipment well outside of the manufacturer's recommended guidelines for use, which we could certainly have a discussion about whether that was a good idea. But, in my garage group, it gave me a laboratory, a training modality which didn't exist for me as a young police officer, and allowed me to develop some strategies, tactics, and techniques for what I've come to think of as an entangled clincher ground range fighting with weapons. So, and I capitalized on that. Again, not intentionally. There was no marketing. I did another class, and I did another class, and I was the only guy in the space doing that with that particular mix of equipment and trying to develop TTP. So it happened very organically. And I think that just, for years I was the only guy that existed in the space that way, again, with all those things. And I think it just made me kind of unique. Yeah. And there are guys now who are traveling with UTM pistols and a mishmash of gear. And I certainly, I've always said that if what I do is going to be a legitimate body of work, there have to be other people besides me looking at it to verify the work, right?
Well, it's like anything else, right? You got to pressure test what you're doing.
Yeah, you got to pressure test it. Well, and more importantly, they have to be other eyes on it, because we're all victims of our own bias and experiences, and a fresh set of eyes is super important. If this was ever going to evolve outside of Craig's Cult of Personality or Fight Club or the chivalrous clique, and was going to become, okay, is this a legitimate, albeit niche, field of study? There have to be other people that disagree with me, taking a similar outlook on the problem, and that's how a legitimate body of work gets developed. So that's what I'm hoping to see are more and more guys, and I support those guys, even if they do things differently or we disagree. I think the hallmark of being an adult is being able to disagree without being disagreeable. And I think the industry needs more of that.
For sure. For sure.
A lot of talk, and it's a long
it makes sense. There's a lot of alphas out there. And, so was this curriculum developed while you were in the PD? What was the impetus behind it? Was it just
The impetus was, to be quite frank, the failures that I had as a traditional martial artist and trying to apply things that had been developed in training space implicitly set up for my comfort and safety in novel space. So, and under very different circumstances. I go through a lecture that precedes the physical component of both Extreme Close Quarter Concepts, which is my gun course, and Edged Weapons Overview, which is my knife course, that I call the Criminal Assault Paradigm. And it's a little lecture point basically on, stepping back and taking a 10,000 foot view of criminal assault as far as general themes that we see from event to event to event. And I base that primarily on the 2 years that I spent working undercover and being robbed 9 times in 2 years. And the several, there are a couple that are significant, but there are a host of minor failures even of my training, the actual techniques, the strategies, and as importantly, the way that content was trained. A draw from concealment on a flat range, waiting on a timer. What is the applicability of that to a draw from concealment in a car with an informant and a bad guy while I'm tasked trying to buy crack cocaine?
Right.
And I'm not waiting on a timer. So,